We still have a minute, and we're waiting for a couple people. It's nice to see everybody so close together. Virginia, can you hear me? Well, this is a good-looking bunch. Gary, are we being recorded?
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess we're live stream and recorded, so we will begin. For that purpose, I am Marie Willoughby, chair of the steering committee for the Timbercrest Seniors for Peace, and we sponsor a monthly program with a large variety of topics and presenters. And we're very pleased today, January 22nd, to have 6 residents who have been in Brethren Volunteer Service out of the many residents who have done similar things, if not through BVS, through some other volunteer service, to share how that service influenced their life. And they kind of have an outline which they're going to follow, but they will introduce themselves and speak for a while. Then the next person will take turn. We think there'll be time at the end for you to make comments or ask questions, but I think if you can possibly hold those to the end, we'll appreciate that. So we're going to start with Wanda.
Good morning. I am Wanda Miller. I graduated from the Napanee High School in 1954, went directly to college at Manchester, graduating in 1958. Several months following graduation, I was offered and accepted the position of secretary to President Hellman of the college. After 15 years, I was growing restless and decided that this was my chance to go to BVS, Post 30 Unit 108. Training was in the summer of 1974 in the Elgin offices and in New Windsor. There were 7 of us, including a couple who lived in Tucson, Arizona. I was assigned to Handy Camp in Tucson, which was housed in the education unit of the Tucson Church of the Brethren. This was a school for retarded children, most of which were barely trainable. There were 3 rooms of 10 to 12 children of that capability and 1 room for those a step higher. We worked on dressing and undressing, socialization, table manners, toilet training, and anything else that they needed. There were approximately 20 on the staff, and we were shuffled back and forth between the rooms. I took the extra job of hanging out the wash every day. Our BVS stipend was $20 a month. I was given permission to take my car to Tucson. My first place to live was with the couple in the unit who lived in Tucson. They lived in a medium-sized house trailer in which I got 1 room and bathroom privileges, plus meals, of course. I was with them approximately 6 months and then moved to another family a little farther out who gave me the use of their travel trailer. I took my meals with them in their house, of course, and got better acquainted with Mexican food. This part of town had very few street lights, and it was very nerve-wracking when helicopters with searchlights were overhead hunting for an escaped drug dealer. Part of the year there were 2 other women, BVSers, from northern and middle Indiana, Linda Carpenter from Goshen, and Karen Flora from Huntington. Having my car gave us some freedom. We sang in the church choir and found a Baskin Robbins for an ice cream treat on the way home. I played the organ some at church. I was able to sing in one of the music concerts at the University of Arizona. We attended many music concerts in the nearby park. I got to attend my first rodeo. One especially unique experience was decorating Christmas tree in shorts. It was hard getting used to lawns of gravel instead of grass. We made several trips into the desert to see that unique vegetation, and we took advantage of visiting the Grand Canyon. During the first 6 months, we lived across from a trailer park. I was able to help out occasionally with someone, usually older folk, with their housekeeping or shopping needs. I'm not sure how much of this experience relates to peacemaking. I am certainly more aware of children with learning disabilities and the understanding and love they and their families need. The year after I left, Arizona decided to mainstream these children, which I can't believe would have worked. My work with folks in the trailer park brought my attention to the needs of older folk and thus Timbercrest.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Bollinger. And we went to Navajo Mission in Liebrook, New Mexico. So when we were married in 1963, we talked about joining BVS together. We were working at the Mexico home, which you might remember became Timbercrest. I was their nurse for a year after we were married, and John had been their maintenance man for a few years. And so the next summer in 1964, we went to New Windsor, Maryland for BVS training for 2 months, where we did some work projects. We were in small cell groups for learning about culture shock, social justice, and learned some things about ourselves. And we worked in the material aid processing donated clothing to send overseas. I admit I was not ready for the culture shock part, as I thought it would not be a big deal. We were sent to Liebrook Navajo Mission, our denomination's mission in New Mexico. Liebrook was a wide spot on the main road from Albuquerque to Farmington, and it consisted of the mission, a Mormon trading post across the road, a school, and a bar down the road about a mile. That was 60 miles from Farmington, where they went to get groceries and supplies. Our director went about once a week. I think I went maybe 2 or 3 times out of the whole time I was there. Most of the Navajo people lived several miles from the mission and were brought into the mission activities by the 3 vans that the mission had. It was kind of hard to tell how far each family lived from the mission because the roads were all gravel, and some of them even turned really slick when they got wet, which happened once in a while. But yeah, my job was being the nurse for the mission and the head cook for the kindergarten-aged children who came to the mission each weekday to learn English. They were being taught by an 82-year-old Methodist woman and a Navajo girl who knew English well. A doctor from Brethren in Christ mission 26 miles away gave me medicines and standing orders to treat people who came to the mission with problems on days other than Thursdays our clinic day. One of my jobs as a nurse was to take women in labor to the hospital, the one connected with the mission 26 miles away. This always happened at night when the husbands came to the mission to get John and me to drive his very pregnant wife to deliver. But first we had to follow him to their Hogan to get her. He had come in his truck and he wasn't taking any chances on her delivering that baby in his truck. One of our first days there was an accident down the road at the bar where a drunk man walked in front of a car and got hit. Another job. We took him to the same hospital. I don't think he survived. There were about 4 or 5 other BVSers there, plus the director and his family. We learned to work together and get along together because we were so isolated. There was nobody else and nowhere else to go except hiking. There was hiking a lot of places there. We had a good time doing that sometimes. There was no working telephone, only a CB radio that we could use to call the Brethren in Christ mission. Another woman who was the principal at the school also lived on the mission grounds. She and the kindergarten teacher and a young BVS girl lost all their belongings in a fire that started in the garage of the house that they lived in, with no fire departments close enough to help. They all survived and made do with what little they had left. How did BVS affect my life? It taught me the meaning of culture shock more than I learned in the training we went through. It enlarged my world, gave me the view of their culture and of the Native American situation that I have carried all my life. While we thought we were helping by ministering to them, and we were missing the whole point of them wanting and needing to hang on to their own culture. We were trying to find solutions to the poverty that they were in, thinking about how the only way for them to fit into our culture was to get jobs in the city and be far from their families, or move the family to the city. There was and is still a lot of prejudice against any of the Indian tribes, partly because of the alcohol, but also there's no industry or sufficient water in that desert-like area to support industry. So there are few jobs. Rug making and jewelry making are some of the main things that they were doing when we were there. That was 60-some years ago, so I'm not sure, what's going on today, but the mission is no longer connected with the with Church of the Brethren. So being a peacemaker is something we were to talk about. Basically, I think we were all peacemakers there by not judging, not condemning, working with them and for them to give them a little better life, fighting the alcohol problem by holding AA meetings at the mission, holding worship services on Sunday, and helping them with their everyday needs and health. It was a great experience. Stayed with me all my life.
I'm Reba Beery. A little bit more. I knew at a young age that I wanted to be a BVSer, even before I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. After training, I entered BVS in April of 1965. The BVS training was 2 months long and at New Windsor, Maryland. This was a very informative time for me as I grew to know who I was and become my own person. We had wonderful teachers like Wilbur Mullen, Dan West, Dale Ackerman, Fran Nice, and many more. It was invigorating to be with young people who were also finding who they were and what they believed. It was the 66th unit of BVS. My project assignment was a nurse at the same place where Carolyn was, located 120 miles north of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was a 72-hour bus ride from New Windsor, Maryland to Lybrook. It was scary to get off that bus in the dark of night out in the middle of nowhere. There were 6 BVSers on this project, with Merle Wyant and his family as our director. The clinic was every Thursday. On this day, the BVSers at the mission would do what we called the mission run in panel trucks, benches along the side, no seatbelts, to pick up folks who wanted to come to the mission to do sewing, Bible study, worship service, and or to see the doctor. The doctor was from, like Carolyn said, the Brethren in Christ Mission Hospital, and he came every Thursday morning, and I was his office nurse. We would see patients, many patients on that day. Folk could come to the mission to see me in the clinic any day or night. There was a 2-way radio to the hospital so I could confer with the doctor. It was good to have Marilyn Bullinger there for about 2 weeks before they left. I came from working in a hospital where you had everything and everybody that you needed right at hand. So after my time in BVS, I had a more confidence in myself as a nurse. I learned how to live peaceably with other BVSers as we functioned like a family unit, taking turns doing cooking, laundry, cleaning, and maintaining the grounds and trucks. We dug graves, made caskets, and prepared the bodies for burial. I learned a lot from the Navajos. I learned many new skills that I would not have learned if I hadn't been at Liebrook. I also learned patience and the wonders of how quickly medicine made a difference to make and keep folk healthy. I went there thinking we were there to save souls, but I soon learned the Navajos had so much to teach us with their way of honoring the earth and everything in it, and that all things were connected and had meaning. Also, being there for 2 years was not enough to build the camaraderie with the Navajo. We needed to move in and live with them for a longer time to get to really know and trust one another. The Navajos were such loving and kind, generous folks, even after all the injustices that were done to them. I learned that the only way to know and understand folk different than me were to live with them and to know them on a deeper level. Our family moved to Vermont with 2 other families and started a Church of the Brethren where there was no Church of the Brethren. 4 of the 6 adults had served in BVS. We continued what we learned in BVS by continuing the work of Jesus, simply, peacefully, together. Today, I have a heart for anyone who is treated unfairly and feel that comes from my experience in BVS.
I'm Dean Beery, and when I came to college my freshman year at Manchester, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I'd done some work with children and really enjoyed that, but the rest of my family didn't think that going into teaching was a good idea, so I had done well in physics. My older brother, who was a physics major, he said, "You need to go into physics," so I majored in physics my freshman year, but at the end of the year, I thought, I didn't see any place to go with that. So I thought, well, this would be a good time to take some time off. So I took out a couple of years and went into BVS and also took care of my draft obligation with that. Our training was in New Windsor for 9 weeks. Our unit was the 47th unit. And I think in our discussions, we ended up being kind of wishy-washy or something because they labeled our unit the fence straddlers. We spent half our day in sorting clothing that had been donated to Church World Service, and then the rest of the day was in training. During that training, they explained to us what projects were available and gave us some choice in that, although it wasn't completely our choice. But I chose the West Side Christian Parish, which was in the inner city of Chicago. And it was a group of 3 storefront churches. I worked out of one of those churches, the Roosevelt Community Church. I was in charge of the after-school club program. So I had a primary age club, I had a junior girls club, a junior boys club, and a teenage club. Also, we did other things like picking up items that people had donated for the parish, taught Sunday school and sang in the choir and those kind of things. We also had some microbuses, VW microbuses that we drove the kids around in for field trips and things like that. There were about eight of us most of the time in this project, and we stayed in a house called the Project House. It was the only white people in a big black neighborhood, but we felt pretty safe there. And we had a set of house parents that watched over us. We took turns cleaning and cooking, things like that. I have some photos of that project if you'd like to see them. As is often the case, I think when you're trying to be helpful to others, you often walk away with more than you give. I came away with a strong conviction that I wanted to work with children, and so when I went back to college, I had majored in elementary education. And then I went back to Chicago, where I taught in an all-black school. It was a large school. In fact, I taught 5th grade. We had 13 sections of 5th grade in the building. And people often, when I tell them that, they often think, well, that must have been a tough thing, but actually, kids are kids. I really enjoyed working with the kids. The main problem I had was with the system itself. There were very, very few special teachers. We were supposed to have art teachers and gym teachers and music teachers, but most of the time we didn't have enough teachers, so they ended up teaching classes, and so if we wanted that, we had to do it ourselves. The first year I started there, we started with reading books, were the only books we had. By Christmas time, most of the rest of the books did filter in. So there was some neglect there. But I also came away from my BVS experience with an understanding of issues that faced by black people in our country. One time I was talking to a mother of one of the kids I was working with, and she said, "It's all good that you come here, and we appreciate your taking our kids on field trips and so on, but when will be the day when a black young person could go into a white neighborhood and provide that service?" And kind of set me back. I really hadn't thought about that. I saw the neglect in the black schools. I heard the pain of a child whose father was a pilot in the Air Force, but airlines wouldn't look at him for being a pilot. So I came away feeling like I had this all together. I understood this. Glad I wasn't prejudiced. And then about 15 years ago, my Sunday school teacher challenged us to take an implicit bias test. Go online and Google implicit bias. And we all have implicit biases. I mean, there are things that we don't think about, and they're unconscious that come up. And of course, I thought I had none of that. So, by the way, if you go online, you can take a test on to see if you have age bias, gender bias. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I took the racial bias test. It's not an intellectual test. It gets at your underlying feelings. And I noticed as I was taking the test, they asked you to associate good words, and then they showed you an image, and so partly it's the speed you can do it. And I began to see, I'm having a little more trouble associating good words with images of black people, and which brought up some feelings. I thought, wow. And when I got done, it said I definitely prefer white people. Now, where did that come from? My parents, my church never taught me to discriminate or people are different, but obviously I picked it up in my world. I began to see a little better the world we live in. We live in a white supremacist world, one judged by white standards, run by white people with very few exceptions. And of all the people I've talked to about taking that implicit bias test, there's only one that came away with an unbiased score. So we live in a world where by almost every measure, blacks are worse off. You think of income, wealth, incarceration, punishment in schools, infant deaths, educational opportunity, you name it. How do we tolerate that? In fact, Now teachers, universities, and businesses are being told they don't even dare talk about diversity or equity or inclusion. I'm afraid that for many people, we just write it off as this disparities as blacks are lazy or don't know better. Then it's their problem, not our problem. Ibram Kendi has written a book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, in which he says an easy test for whether racism is present is to look to see if there are those differences, those disparities between groups. They have to be caused by either a group is inferior, lazy, can't learn, don't want to, which I hope we all reject, or there are endemic racist forces at work. And I hear people say sometimes, well, why not just be colorblind? In reality, there's no such thing as race, which is true. The DNA variation within races is a lot bigger than any average DNA difference between races. But we have hundreds of years of disinformation that have constructed this concept of race. So until we deal with those underlying biases, it will affect all our lives. By being aware of my own bias, I can see better what is happening around and hopefully work toward a world that is more equitable. My time in BVS started me on a path of awareness and learning that is still continuing today.
I'm Mary Eby. I graduated from Manchester College in 1965 with a degree in business and economics with an emphasis in accounting because we didn't have an accounting major. Then I worked for the Internal Revenue Service as a field auditor for 1.5 years. With my debts for college, the car, and furniture paid off, I was broke. No financial obligation meant I could spend time in the BVS program. And when I went in BVS, first year BVSers got $10 a month to cover some of your necessities. I was in the January 1967 unit and had BVS training at New Windsor, Maryland. Don Snyder and Miller Davis were leaders for our training. Dan West was with us for a week of classes. We spent a half-day processing clothes for relief. Training included spending a weekend at Pilot House in Baltimore and attending a black church for worship on Sunday morning. For my week of practice project, I went to a retirement community in Pennsylvania and helped with crafts and activities. Wilbur Mullen worked with us on our assignments for BVS. My project assignment was the Director of Crafts and Activities at the Farnikidi Retirement Home in Boonesboro, Maryland. We had approximately 120 residents that included independent cottages, apartments, and healthcare. The number of BVSers in the craft and activity area varied from just me to 3 people. I was responsible for crafts, activities, the ceramic program, the post office, the rhythm band, for hosting groups that visited us. A lot of time was spent on ceramics since we had molds and poured our own greenware and cleaned it. While I was there, our administrator said, someday we will need to keep attendance records for who attends activities. Things in the industry have changed a lot. Women BVSers did not drive any of the project vehicles. When we went on outings to local parks for a picnic or the free Sunday evening band concert in the park in Hagerstown, one of the BVS maintenance workers drove the White Elephant, which was an old school bus painted white. And we had a one-step step stool that was used for people to get on and off the bus. And one time, it didn't get moved, and the bus ran over the step. So they said the white elephant stepped on the stool. Some of the other BVSers on project worked in maintenance, drove the bus to pick employees up for work, and some worked in nursing. We lived in the retirement home and ate our meals served family style in the dining room. We had our tables. We weren't commingled with the residents, but we were in the same room. My experience in BVS was an opportunity to work with people and develop good personal relationships. Crafts and activities were a good change from working with numbers and studies for classes. One of the challenges was having a life away from the retirement community. It was better after I came back to Indiana by bus and drove my car back. So the last half of my time on project, I had a car. An interesting event that happened was when a BVSer who was in the April unit came to work in crafts and activities, then left the program early to marry her pastor back home. They had a very good friendship and a very non-traditional courtship, and it was an unusual, lovely love story that they had. Everyone was excited about the wedding. 3 carloads of people went to the wedding. After their honeymoon, they came back to Farnaquiti and went through the ceremony again. So everyone, including those who could not go in person to the wedding, could help them celebrate. My work career in accounting includes 11 years in the long-term care industry. I've also held other office jobs and taught accounting, business math, and personal finance classes at the college level. And my experience in BVS has contributed to success in all of these areas.
My name is Glenn Petrie. When I was 5 years old, they had a rule that you had to be 6 in order to start school. Well, then they decided that maybe a little bit, as long as you are 6 by a certain time frame, you could go ahead and start. And they made that time frame actually several months into the year. And my birthday was on the last day that would count. So I was the youngest in the class all the way through. And finally, I was in college, and as a sophomore in college, you had to fill out all the papers for drafting, being drafted, I'm talking about. And I filled it out as I'd like to be a conscientious objector. But they sent me a 2S standard, which meant that they probably were not going to draft me while I was in college. So I'm a sophomore, and I hadn't decided yet what my standard was going to be. What was I going to major in? And I decided I'll do BVS, and maybe I'll get to go to Europe and help hand out supplies, and heifer project had been started. Maybe I could help on that end of the heifer project. It just sounded like a really good thing. I would take 2 years and do my alternative service, and then come back and finish college. However, the draft board, when they found out that I was dropping out of school to go to BVS, sent me a 1A classification, which means you're ready to be drafted. Now what? So in BVS, I actually got that started, and the program was like these people have already told you. We had an expert in some field, and they would teach us for 1 week's time. They were the expert, and then somebody else. One of our experts was Dan West, who had helped form the BVS program and other things. He was kind of a thinker. I had known him from being near his area, where we both grew up, actually, or were there. He was an adult and I was not. But he taught personal discipline. And one of his examples was an aviation cadet that he'd read up on, and how terribly difficult their job was. They made it awfully hard in just all ways for them to stay in the program. Aviation cadets were going to be pilots. That was the purpose of the whole thing. And sounded like next to impossible. Well, I went back to college when I couldn't go on project because I was in the wrong classification. It took about a year to get my notice changed so that I could be in conscientious objector. Meantime, I kind of changed my mind about the whole deal. Conscientious objection was a kind of a good thing, but the other side wasn't fair. Japan had attacked the United States secretly, sneakily. They attacked in the middle of the night on Sunday morning. On Sunday morning, they attacked, killed many people, sailors, sunk ships, including aircraft carrier, many pilots killed. And I just didn't feel good toward Japan at all. And my being a conscientious objector, I wasn't sure that was my right field anymore. But also, if I told them that I wasn't so sure I wanted to be a conscientious objector, if I told them that, I would eliminate any chance of ever doing it if I changed my mind back again and wanted to be a conscientious objector. So I kind of just held my mind and stayed in and got the classification finally. But I'd taken a year and I'd gone back to college. I picked a major, and there was only one more year that I needed to go to graduate. So I kind of decided to go that route. the major was peace studies. Gladys Muir had tried very hard to start that program. At that time, peace studies was not done in United States particularly. I think she was the first, or at least one of the first grad programs of peace studies. After that was started, other colleges and universities picked it up. Notre Dame has a peace studies major, and their professor that started it was a graduate of Manchester College. So it did some real good. And back to me, I went ahead and graduated, and then I had really changed my mind about conscientious objection. I thought there are other people that really don't want to fight, but our country has called on us to fight. Maybe I should do that too. But I didn't want to just march in the mud, so I wanted to be something of value. I had always been fascinated by flying, birds flying, and how they could change directions, amazing. And I just always thought flying was neat. How could I fly? What was that Dan West had done? Aviation cadet. I'll make all the effort to to be an aviation cadet. I changed my classification. I went in and said, I've changed my mind on this. I don't want to be a conscientious objector anymore. I'll go ahead and serve in the military. And I signed my name to that. Took about 5 minutes maybe, and I changed my classification. Going the other way took a year. So now I'm trying to do all the tests that you have to take in order to be chosen into the flying aviation cadet. When I finally had passed all the tests, mental and physical, they told me it would be about a year before actually I would be called to start the program. I thought, what am I going to do for a year? But I thought, catch a slow boat to China, come back, be about a year. I went to New York City and tried to catch a boat. All the boat captains said, "Are you a member of the union?" No, but I talked to the union people, went to the union and said, "I'd like to join the union." And they said, "Do you have a job?" And I'd say, "No, but I can do it. I can get one if you'll give me a union card." It cost, I think, $100 or more. And I was willing to do that. No, didn't work. I couldn't get the union card because I didn't have a job. I couldn't get the job because I didn't have a union card. So I, at this point, tried to go a different route. And that's when I did all the stuff to try to become an aviation cadet, and finally was made that. And they said I could start the program. I started it, flew planes. That was fun. Especially it was fun when you didn't have an instructor in the plane chewing you out all the time, everything you did. You did it too fast. You did it too slow. You did it too high. You did it too low. Whatever you did, you got chewed out. But I just left that go. I enjoyed being up there, and especially solo. You could do acrobatics. Wow, is that fun? I recommend flying. Especially nice when you don't have to pay the bills, which was the way it was. I flew airplanes, the small planes start with, a bigger plane, faster, and then finally I went to a different base, and there I flew jet plane. No, that in some ways is easier to fly than the other planes. It's amazing, but it was fast, and it took a lot of fuel to keep it going. After I'd been in the Air Force for some time, they made the rule that you had to stay an extra year. To start with, I'd signed for 4 years, and now some general somewhere said all aviation cadets have to be in 5 years. I thought that was a terrible thing because I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in and make a career of it. But when you're in the military, you're not in charge. Whatever they promised you doesn't count anymore. They're in charge, and they change the rules on you, whatever. So there I was, but I was in, not during a wartime, and we had too many qualify to move on the next step. And they changed the regulations. They said, we've got too many pilots. They were paying us $100 if we were flying. So that upped our pay considerable. And that meant that they really didn't want to have a whole bunch of pilots when we weren't at war. So they made it easy to drop out. I dropped out of pilot training and needed a job. Give teaching a try. I decided I wasn't going to be a teacher to start with, way back, but now, well, I wanted to be sure that I didn't want to be a teacher. I applied all over the state, essentially, and told my situation, and several contacted me. A principal and the trustee drove from way far in northern Indiana, way south to, I was at the time going to college in Terre Haute, and interviewed me, and they said, we just happened to bring a contract along that you could join, and you could be a teacher. I said, well, let me see. So I went and visited their school and then signed the contract and became a teacher and used BVS as a help to get started.
Well, these have been excellent stories and presentations. And do any of you have questions for any particular person, or just a statement about your own experience you want to share within the next few minutes? I don't see anybody waving a hand. So we want to thank these people again, and we have a program again in February on the 4th Thursday at 10 o'clock.